This video is entitled Procurement Documents and is part of the Project Management for Technology course. It goes along with Chapter 9 in our text. I'm James Reneau Ph.D. at Shawnee State University, and I'll be taking you through this video presentation. In this video, we're going to discuss the make or buy decision and creating a statement of work. We're going to define what a contract is. We're going to discuss how to solicit, select, and contract with vendors. We're going to list and we're going to list other documents you may encounter as you're dealing with vendors. So one of the very first things we need to decide in the project as we're moving forward is make or buy. It's a decision we have to look at everything. Are we going to make it or are we going to buy it? And we need to look at the real cost of make or buy. The costs are not just the monetary units of cost, but do we have the expertise in-house to do it or not? Would we generate expertise in our business if we did it in-house that we wouldn't if we were to buy it? So we need to look at a lot more than just the dollars and cents. Um, Timing and other things also apply. The phrase procurement planning means that it's the process to acquire goods and services from outside. Procure is to buy. You'll be purchasing equipment, you'll be purchasing consulting staff augmentation, and you'll be purchasing other goods and services, for instance, office supplies, raw material, all of those kinds of. But we should always start any procurement process with the make or buy decision. Are we going to do it in-house or are we going to go out and purchase it? So as we're starting the whole make or buy decision, you should develop a statement of work or SOW. In a statement of work, it needs to detail the goods or services you need for the project. Actually, the good or service. So each statement of work would be for a different good or service you need. Involve the project manager, involve the team, involve the stakeholders, involve your sponsor, involve all the people you know. And remember, your project management office or company may already have templates for you to use as you develop these statements of work. Now, soliciting vendors. So, vendors won't come to us because they don't know what's going on with our specific project. It's our project. We're in charge of it. So, we have to go out and contact vendors. We have to solicit vendors. There are three general documents used to solicit vendors: the RFI, RFQ, and RFP. Sounds like alphabet soup. It's not. Let's just go through them each. The RFI stands for Request for Information. So basically, we're going to reach out to vendors and say, okay, tell us about you and what you can do for us. We're not yet asking for quotations. We're not yet asking for specific solutions. We're not actually contracting at this point. All we're doing is going out and asking, what can you do for us? And references and those kinds of things. For instance, maybe you wanted to bring in a consulting firm to help you with an accounting situation. Well, then you would go and you would ask for information. You'd send out an RFI request to multiple accounting firms, and they would send you back a list of their key employees, their what they can do, their abilities, references, people like you they've worked for in the past, and all of that, and let you kind of put them all together and say, well, I like these three. This guy, he's not qualified, and this one they can't do it. But these guys, they look like they can do it. At that point, you would send them a request for quotation or an RFQ. And a quotation, an RFQ, basically, you say, here's what we want, give us a quote. Now, here's where we're dealing with price and service and warranty and all those other things we're going to talk about in later slides in this video. But The RFQ is give us a price. We know what we want. We know you can do it. Give us a price. And then after we go through the RFQ process, we'll enter the RFP process. We're ready to purchase. We're ready to begin. I need a formal contract. I need a formal contract. I need it here so that we can move forward with it. We're ready to do it. So the RFP would include the RFQ and the quotation that they sent you back. The RFI, RFQ, and RFP also usually include the SOW, the statement of work, because you've already done the work once to define what the work was, what the good or service you need. Well, then you give that to your potential vendors, and they now have that same fair playing field to look at. So an RFI is a request for information about the vendor, about what they can do, about their capabilities, about how they do business, about their references. RFQ is an actual quote for something. And then an RFP is, okay, we're ready to move forward with the quote. Give us a formal proposal, not a quotation, a formal written proposal that we can sign a contract. So those are the three ways, those are the three documents we use to solicit a vendor. So we've gotten all of this information from multiple vendors, and it's time to select the right vendor. We need a vendor that understands our project, that understands our business, that understands how we do things, that we need a vendor that actually can do the work. We need a vendor that's got some experience, maybe with our company on other projects, maybe not. Maybe with us when we were at other places, maybe not. Um, Maybe with our competitors. And we need a vendor that's going to be financially stable. We don't need a vendor that's going to disappear in the brittle of the process. As we're looking at vendors, we may want to look at a vendor's warranty. We may want to look at a vendor's intellectual property rights and the contracts that they want us to enter into to use and to share their intellectual property. Will they license us the property that they create in the project, or are the license terms going to be appropriate? Um, we need to possibly follow up some references that the vendor gives us, because do we know the competitor that they've worked for? Can we call them and say, hey, were they good guys or not? And usually, business professionals will tell the truth to each other, even if we are competitors. And, lastly, and maybe firstly, sometimes it's cost. Because if you've got two vendors offering exactly the same product, maybe you've got two suppliers offering the exact same computer networking component with the same manufacturer warranty, with the same 2-day free shipping, then cost matters. You'd buy it from the vendor with the lowest cost because you're buying a commodity. You're buying the same old thing. But remember, the least expensive vendor may not be your best choice. Just may not be your best choice. The author of our book and I recommend creating a vendor score sheet where we put the vendor, create a row for each vendor, and then create columns for various criteria. Financial stability, warranty, um, uh, fit, corporate corporate governance, stability. I said that already, but put various things across cost, put various things across the top, and then score them on a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10 or in some way. That way you can objectively kind of look at all the vendors and come up with their totals and say, well, this vendor wins, but our past experiences, we'd rather try these guys or not. But that will let you help percolate a good decision and help you to select a right vendor. So at this point, we've talked about soliciting vendors and soliciting information from a vendor. We've talked about how to choose a vendor, hopefully choose a good vendor. Um, Now we're going to start moving into actually contracting and making formal written binding agreements with the vendors. As a review, and I'm not a business law professor, but as a review, I want to talk about what is a contract. You should know this cold, you should know this solid. This is just basic business and you sign and enter contracts on a regular basis as a person or as a corporation. Remember that a contract has three main parts. One, an offer. I'm going to make you an offer. Number two, there's an acceptance. You accept the offer. And three, consideration. You pay me for what I'm going to do. That consideration can be monetary. That consideration can be goods, services, anything of value. Um, a contract may be written, as most of the contracts you're going to do are going to be, but in small contracts, it may be a verbal contract. You might have a vendor that you'll just pick up the phone and say, I want 10 of these, and he'll say the price, and you go, deal, and he sends them to you and you pay him. I mean, it might be something that easy. It may be a verbal contract, because that's still a contract, what I described on that phone call. But remember also, a contract, besides having those three main parts, a contract must be for a legal purpose. It's not legal to, well, a contract for a non-legal purpose is not binding. You can't take someone court because they screwed you in a dope deal. Just isn't going to work. Judge is going to throw you both in jail for that one. So it has to be three parts: offer, acceptance, and consideration. It can be either written or verbal, and it must be for a legal purpose. So now that we've defined what a contract is, let's talk about contracting vendors. So there are generally three types of contracts you're going to deal with when contracting a vendor. The first is called a fixed price contract. A fixed price contract is just what it sounds like. Give me an offer to sell me something for a certain price. I agree, accept, and I give you consideration and you give me the goods. You walk into the grocery store, there's a price on the wall, there's a price on the shelf for the item. It's a fixed price contract. You go to a car dealer. You negotiate for a price of a vehicle. It's a fixed price contract. As soon as you shake hands, you fixed on the price and it's done. It's a well defined, usually used for well defined commodities or services. The risk is with the vendor. Think about if you have entered into a contract for delivery of 100 PCs over the next 6 months with this specification for this amount of money. What happens if the price of memory triples all of a sudden because of a factory fire or something? Well, that's not your problem. The vendor agreed to a fixed price, it's their problem. So the risk has been moved to the vendor because you've negotiated the price, they've agreed to a fixed price, and there you go. But this really only works for defined commodities or services. There's another type of contract known as a cost reimbursable contract, which is basically a cost plus contract. Um, yeah, I'll do that for you, but I'm going to charge you all of my material cost plus this much. No, but I can't budget exactly how much it's going to cost because I don't know exactly. It's cost plus. So a cost plus contract is a lot more risky for the buyer than the vendor. So the buyer is assuming all of the risk in a cost plus contract. There are certain things though that you just can't do on a fixed price. There are just certain kinds of things it just won't work. um, Maybe for instance, building a building. We're going to charge you cost plus this much or cost plus this percent to build the building. Costs can change. Price of concrete changes every day. So um, that makes it more risky for the buyer. Um, and then the third type of contract you're going to find are the time and material contract. We've negotiated a rate, but we don't know the quantity yet. Um, and that's usually what's used for staff augmentation. For instance, you need a database guy. You need a database administrator to help create this database that you're going to use for this new application. It's going to take anywhere between 5 and 30 hours, probably close to 20 hours of that administrator's database person's time. Maybe that's what you've estimated. Pessimistic, optimistic, most likely. Well, you would just negotiate with him and say, or her, and say, okay, $200 an hour, and they deal. Whether it's a 3-hour job or whether it's a 40-hour job, you've agreed to the price. And with a time and material contract, that's how staff augmentation is usually done. The buyer does have some control because they can either buy it or not. They're not required to buy so many hours. Um, the seller knows what the price is going to be and potentially could get in a bind of over allocating, overselling. But it's a good way to do things, especially when we're dealing with staff augmentation and other types of unknowns where the time and the exact quantity isn't known, but the price is. When dealing with your vendors, there are lots of other documents you're going to see. Though you may see an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement. And an NDA basically says you won't share our secret or we won't share your secret. As a consultant, I've had to sign NDA clauses, NDA agreements with clients to be able to work for them to say, well, I'm not going to tell anyone, your competitors or anybody else, what you do inside your business. That's between you and your business, and so I've agreed to that. Um, there's often a letter of intent before we sign the contract. It's kind of like an RFP, but it's a little bit less formal, where we send out an email saying, "Well, I plan to buy this from you." It's not binding. It's what we're planning to do. An MOU is a memorandum of understanding, and it outlines performance where you can't necessarily have a vendor relationship. For instance, a government to government, an employer to a trade union, um, where you're kind of tweaking things. We've come to an understanding, but it's not a binding contract, but it is binding too because it outlines the performance that you both agree to. There's a service level agreement, an SLA, that defines performance levels, service levels. Um, how much uptime? For instance, you're buying a cloud server. You want it up 99.99% of the time. Well, that's a service level agreement because the vendor of the cloud has agreed to have it up that often, have it ready that often, have the performance up. Response time is another thing that SLAs will include. You've got a vendor, you've got a consultant, and if there's an emergency, if there's a problem, they'll respond within 1 business day. They'll respond within 3 business hours. They'll respond within whatever. So that's an SLA. And the last document I want to talk about is the purchase order. The purchase order is a binding offer to purchase if the vendor accepts. Remember, contract has 3 parts: offer, acceptance, um, offer, acceptance, consideration. But this is different. This is where the buyer makes an offer. This is where the buyer sends what's called a purchase order saying, I will buy 100 of these for this price. And the vendor gets the purchase order and says, okay. So there was offer to buy, acceptance to sell, instead of an offer to sell, acceptance to buy. kind of backwards, but a purchase order is a legally binding offer to purchase if the vendor accepts. So you send a purchase order saying, I want 100 cases of paper. And the supplier goes, oh, and it has a price. And the vendor goes, "Oh, yeah, I'll say 100 cases of paper for that." Offer, acceptance. He sends you the paper, you send him the check. Boom, done. So a purchase order is a binding offer to purchase. The references used in creating this video were Kim Heldman's Project Plus study guide and CISC's What Three Elements Are Necessary for a Legal Contract, and the references and websites are above. And this concludes our video on contracting. This presentation is copyright 2020 by James Reneau Ph.D. You can contact me at jreneau@shawnee.edu. Remember, this work is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 International License, and I would like to say thank you for watching.